Good evening. The gay community is facing a terrifying health problem right now. A week ago, when we first planned this show, the statistics were that 891 men were diagnosed as having AIDS, with 426 of them, almost half, in New York City alone. In the intervening time between then and the night of the taping of this show, those figures have risen to 1,112 men diagnosed as having AIDS, with 526 in New York City, 100 more cases in New York City. Total from 34 states and 15 countries. 418 people have died, 195 dead in New York City alone. Last November, all by itself, there were 47 cases of AIDS in New York City, 1.5 cases a day, and these figures are low due to slow reporting by the medical establishment and some unreliable statistics, and it is predicted that those figures are going to double before the year is out. 47.3% of all the AIDS cases are in New York City, and 72.4% of them are gay and bisexual men.
The Atlanta Center for Disease Control considers smallpox a most dangerous epidemic. The mortality rate for smallpox is 25%. For a bad case of AIDS, the mortality rate in the first year is 39%. After 3 years, the mortality rate is 86%. AIDS stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, a disorder in which the body's immunological system becomes damaged. Under normal circumstances, this system protects the body from viruses and other injurious agents. In AIDS, the body is left vulnerable to a host of infectious diseases. The most common ones are a cancer called Kaposi sarcoma and a pneumonia called pneumocystis carinii. The cause of AIDS is not yet known. Good evening, I'm Marcia.
And I'm Vito Russo, and tonight on Our Time, we're going to be taking a look at how the gay community is coping with the most serious crisis in its history. In a moment, I'll be talking to Larry Kramer from the Gay Men's Health Crisis and Virginia Apuzzo, the director of the National Gay Task Force, about what's being done and what isn't being done to fight this epidemic. You'll hear from an AIDS patient and from Diego Lopez, the coordinator for the Crisis Control Center at GMHC. Also, you'll hear a debate, point counterpoint, between two gay men on the issue of promiscuity in the gay male community and how people are reaching out to their friends and their lovers at this most difficult time. Stay with us. With all this talk about diseases that gay men are susceptible to, especially immunological diseases, do you know friends of yours have changed the way they live, or you yourself have changed your gay lifestyle because of the publicity surrounding those diseases?
I'm essentially monogamous, and so I see if the scare is going to happen to anybody and they change their life, they're going to try becoming more monogamous. I have several friends who, in fact, don't care for that as a lifestyle, have switched haven't had sex with anybody in months for fear of indeed contracting something. As it turns out, I know one person who is still as active as possible, and among my circle of friends, we now call him the carrier.
My guests tonight are Larry Kramer from the Gay Men's Health Crisis and Ginny Apuzzo from the National Gay Task Force. I'd like to ask them first how the community is beginning to cope with this particular epidemic at this time and how rough it's been to organize people behind this issue and get people out there fighting against this disease. What's going on right now? How is the community coping with this, and how tough has it been for you to organize around it? Larry?
How is the community coping? It seems to be coping in a number of ways. Gay Men's Health Crisis, of course, is perhaps the healthiest and most visible. There's also something called the AIDS Network, which consists of about 50 or 60 community leaders, and I think it's really that which Ginny and I are here representing today more than. It's very difficult for me, as one of the people who started Gay Men's Health Crisis. Gay Men's Health Crisis is not allowed to be political. Right. And it is time to be very, very political. So I am now prefacing my remarks and my appearances in public when I shoot off my mouth as saying I am not speaking for gay men's health crisis. What I am saying does not necessarily reflect gay men's health crisis. How we're coping and how we should be coping, who knows? It's just a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. Very little has been done to help us on any level, city level, federal level. State level seems to be getting a little better, and the community level as well. This community is not, as usual, is organized self, and I guess it's a few of these issues that Ginny and I wanted to address today.
Well, for instance, what have you run into on the government level? A lot of people seem to be angry at city agencies for not raising more money for this, for not paying enough attention to it. People are angry, for instance, at the straight media for the way they've been paying attention to it.
All of this is true. If this were an epidemic that were happening to straight people, let's forget about the fact that there would be millions and millions of dollars already being spent to research it, but let's just take it on a local level. Everything that this city knows about AIDS has come through it in one way or another through gay men's health crisis. It has not come to it through the Board of Health, Department of Health. It has not come to it through the Department of Health and Hospitals. Both organizations which are charged by law to educate communities about a public health emergency. You go into a hospital, the staff doesn't know about AIDS. And that's because they're not educated by this very city about this epidemic that is going on right here. The mayor refuses to acknowledge that there's a public health emergency going on in this town.
We're also hearing a lot of rumors that there are nurses threatening to strike if they have to work with AIDS patients, that there's been mistreatment of patients, that the hospitals are not responding with any degree of sensitivity to AIDS patients.
If you can get into a hospital, there's a month waiting list at Sloan Kettering. Hospitals are so filled up with AIDS patients that you can't get in, even if you're close to death. NYU is so filled up that they have now had to set up a special unit at Beekman downtown, which they also run because they can't put the patients in at NYU or Bellevue.
Ginny, you've been dealing with the issue of the Hemophilia Foundation not so long ago decided that they were going to discourage gay people from giving blood. What's the story on that? Because it seemed to me particularly insidious that now we were beginning to identify gay people as having bad blood, and that information is, potentially.
I think the problem is not unlike what Larry's explaining. Look at the vulnerable position the gay community is in. On one hand, we're victims of an unidentified epidemic. The necessity for research is clear to anyone. There's no question we need the research money. The gay community has been talking about this for 2 years. And 2 years later, there's still foot dragging in terms of research. There is speculation that the issue of blood may provide the transmissive agent. If that's the case, doesn't it make sense to, one, test the blood, and two, escalate that imperative with regard to research? Neither of those two things are being done. What's being done is that we're blaming the victim. Now, if you've been in the whole social movement of looking at where there is oppression, blaming the victim is not new. Every other community that's ever been oppressed has experienced that blaming of the victim. In this instance, one victim is being pitted against another victim. The homosexual male community, as victims of AIDS, are being put up as the agent that is making even more vulnerable the very vulnerable community in the hemophiliac, in the notion of hemophiliacs. Now, what that does is to suggest that the homosexual movement is standing back and only looking to protect itself. That's absurd. We've been saying research, we've been saying test the blood. If there was no question as to a person's job being secure, then who would hesitate to say, perhaps you shouldn't take my blood now? But as long as there is discrimination against gays, especially in the area of employment, how do you expect a gay man to say, I'm not going to give blood in this program on my workplace because there may be some question about the desirability of adding my blood to the blood pool? And beyond that, we're talking about an industry that continues to purchase blood. Now, people who have their blood purchased have a vested interest in obscuring, their medical history. And so how serious is this industry about cleaning up the problem of contaminants in blood?
Yeah. Much easier to blame us.
And which is, you see, one of the things is that they set up the construct, the straight world sets up the construct that you'll be punished for coming out of the closet. And now they don't want you to give blood, and so you have an office blood drive where a gay man is not going to give blood because he doesn't want to be brought out of the closet as gay. And so really, in a lot of ways, they screw themselves.
Well, they screw themselves. If this epidemic, as everyone in a responsible level seems to feel, is going to hit more and more straight people, they're screwing themselves by not doing the research now. As in hepatitis, we're doing everybody suffering for them. They could find the cure on our bodies. Let us be the guinea pigs before it even hits them. But no, because it's such a political hot potato that it's happening to gays or happening to black Haitians or whatever, and people don't want to touch it,
right.
They're only, again, hurting themselves. I think the blood issue is going to get very messy. It's a no-win situation for gay people. If we had taken our blood away in the first place, we would have been stigmatized. If we tell people we shouldn't be stigmatized, we're still going to be stigmatized.
Right.
I think we have to somehow make the blood issue look like small potatoes, which in fact it is compared to the overall issue. And of course, to make something look small potatoes requires a community, our community, to really be perceived as being very, very angry in this issue, that nothing is being done to help us. If this were happening in the straight, white, non-drug using, middle-class community, that money that the NIH has already got would have been put into use for research 2 years ago. It's absurd.
What about our own people? I get the feeling that a lot of gay men are sitting around saying, gee, isn't this a terrible thing, and I hope they find a cure for it real quick.
Right.
And that's the extent of their reaction. Who should they be angry at? Who should they be writing letters to? You keep saying that the mayor and the mayor's office and the city government is doing nothing. I mean, specifically, are they really just doing nothing about this?
Well, it's all what is the definition of nothing? Yes, they have made a few little gestures towards the community. They've set up a meeting that meets once every 2 months and addresses this issue. I don't consider that doing anything. The mayor has refused to be perceived as having anything to do with this issue. Repeated requests to meet with him since October have not been addressed. There is a man called Herb Brickman who is a liaison to the gay community, who is a gay man, who is, I am ashamed to say, a gay man, because he has impeded the course of taking care of gay men so astoundingly in this city.
There is a process, and you know, all of us have seen that process at work. When one wants to take attention and focus it on a crisis, you take the full power of your office. And I don't hold Ed Koch any more up for guilt than I hold any other official who sees a crisis, who selects to turn his or her head. This is New York City. It's a very powerful city. We spent more money removing snow from the streets in New York City than we've spent to earmark in terms of solving this problem. Now, isn't that a kind of human travesty? People are dying at the rate that Marcia identified at the beginning of the program. 86% in 3 years are fatalities. And
over 2 new cases a day.
And you're looking at a person as powerful as the mayor, a person as powerful as the governor, an institution as powerful as the national health institution in this country. And what is the gay community confronting? Paralysis. It's as if everyone is paralyzed by the scope of the problem. But no one has been paralyzed in terms of identifying what may be causing this. It's promiscuity. Stop, behave, go away.
Right.
That's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, we're going to be dealing with the issue of promiscuity a little later on in the show.
Well, let me just say right now that there is no profile that works 100% across the board for the average AIDS victim. There are the promiscuous, there are the almost monogamous. There are the drug-using, there are the non-drug-using. There are reported cases of single-contact infection. I'm getting tired of hearing of promiscuity as the issue. It's again blown out of all proportion, as is the blood.
Yeah.
But there are other things that the gay and lesbian community have been talking about for years. For instance, redefinition of the family. What of the AIDS victim who's in a hospital today and whose family may or may not know that he's a homosexual, whose lover is totally severed from the medical communication that goes on, the lack of privacy in terms of even seeing one, if you can get into the hospital, as Larry says.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a real concern. What about dealing with the homophobia that has paralyzed healthcare workers who oftentimes are Haitians or gay themselves?
Exactly.
I mean, these people are victims of a lack of information. What is being done to provide those union folks in hospitals with the kind of information they need so that they continue to do their job in a manner that serves our community and also deals with their very real fears?
Yeah.
The important thing is we can go on blaming and attacking everybody, but the only way we are ever going to get anything is if we organize and get angry ourselves. This is a life and death situation.
Right.
We have never been in such a terribly threatening position in the whole history of being gay, in the whole history of homosexuality. Right. This is life or death. We are dying. We are going to have to unite. We are going to have to be angry. We're going to have to be perceived as being a threat. Our votes are going to have to be perceived as taking away elected officials from people like Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who does not support us in this issue, Mayor Koch, who does not support us in this issue, Moynihan, who does not have an openly gay person on his entire staff. We have to start being powerful or we are going to die. It is up to us right now.
Well, I want to thank you both. I don't blame you for being angry, and I'd like to get a lot of people in this community angry. The rest of this show may help you to get angry, because we're going to be telling you some things that may scare the shit out of you, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, because you need to be scared in order to get angry. Also, later on, we'll tell you about a benefit where at least if you can't get too angry, you can give some money and go to the circus on April 30th and raise $150,000 to fight this disease, because nobody else is going to do it for us. Coming up, we're going to hear from some women on their reaction to AIDS and the gay male lifestyle, a debate between two gay men on promiscuity, a conversation with an AIDS patient, and a crisis support worker from the Gay Men's Health Crisis. And now I think you're going to be interested in some more answers to our question of the week, which we took outside the Saint and on Christopher Street, asking gay men if they changed their lifestyle in response to this crisis. Stay with us.
Portion of our time is brought to you by Christopher Street Magazine.
There's been a lot of stuff in the press, a lot of publicity about immunodeficiency diseases that gay men are susceptible to lately. Do you know, have you any knowledge that gay men are changing, promiscuous gay men in particular, changing their lifestyle out of fear because of these new revelations about diseases?
Well, I have a friend that has the AIDS disease, and I would say that I've seen a lot of change. I find that people very promiscuous are used to going out in bars. They make statements and they seem to act on them in the sense that I have to find a lover. I'm tired of running around. I know people that no longer go to the baths because they're afraid of multiple contacts. So I'm surprised, to tell you the truth, although I think there's a problem with this, and that is that there seems to be a lot of puritanism and self-hate, and there's a real backlash.
I don't think it's going to change many people as far as their activity, sexual activity. I think people who are, you know, it's like smoking cigarettes. People who smoke cigarettes, you know, they've been told for years that it's going to cause cancer, and they say, well, that's fine, you know, if I get cancer, I get cancer. I think it's the same thing about their sexual activity. I don't think they're going to change much.
I really haven't changed anything. A lot of friends have, but I have one friend who has this attitude. You can stay at home with a lover and not go anywhere, or you can stay at home and not do anything, or you can go out and play all the time. But then if you stay home and don't do anything, you could go out and go to work one morning and get hit by a bus. So what's the use of staying home?
My friend's friend, he had two friends that got a gay disease. They all got a gay cancer. They got so upset about it. And in fact, me and all my friends, we don't go to either a bathhouse or a bar that as often as we did before.
Like if you smoke, you get cancer. If you do this, you catch this. So the disease is always going to be around. So if you're lucky, you won't get it. If you're not lucky, you got it.
It's definitely hurting the mine shaft. It's definitely hurting some of the bars. It's definitely hurting some of the baths.
Some people I do know have said anymore, but still see them hanging out in the other bars, and like the person you meet at 5 o'clock in the morning at a backroom bar is the same person no matter where you meet them at. So, but I don't know anyone that's that just, you know, shut themselves off from the world about it.
Hi, we're back in the studio. I'd like to take a minute to tell you what's coming up on our show. We're going to be having a visit from a doctor who has some startling medical information for us. It has to do with quiche, I believe. We'll also be seeing a point-counterpoint debate on the issue of promiscuity in the gay male community. Later, I'll be talking to a counselor from the gay men's health crisis and a gay man who's been diagnosed as having AIDS. But right now, we'd like to do something that hasn't been done very often in the course of this epidemic, and that is talk to women about AIDS. We asked 3 women, 2 of whom have gay male brothers, if they would talk to us about some of the provocative issues. Pam Brandt, Marcia Steele, and Greta Schiller will talk to us about their reaction to the initial outbreak of the epidemic, to the contrast between the lesbian lifestyle and the gay male lifestyle, and about their concern for their gay brothers and their gay male friends. Let's take a look.
My first reaction was, well, gay men have been so promiscuous and they fuck around so much that it's only natural that they would start to get these bizarre diseases, and I just hope it doesn't start to affect the rest of us. And then over the talking to other gay men, friends of mine, and reading more about it, I realized that my initial reaction was basically, although it was a gut reaction, it was really something that was not an opinion that I really held, because what I realized was that it was the fact that it was a disease and the fact that it was affecting large numbers of people, whether they were gay or not, and that the fact that the medical establishment wasn't putting what I saw as serious attention into exploring the problem was basically homophobic, and it was really bad. And that but it didn't really surprise me, because the medical establishment is that way about everything. I mean, the whole women's health movement started the whole idea of that the medical establishment was not responsible to the needs of any particular community. So it doesn't surprise me that was a reaction at all.
I'm in a band. At the time, the band that I was in was playing at a gay male club, Badlands, down on West Street in Christopher. And that's, I think, specifically why I felt so paranoid about it. There was no information really about how it was transferable, and the men, you know, they would come up after a set. You know, the guys, they were just real nice to me as a woman in the club, and they would come up and say, "Oh, that was just a great set," you know, and you know, I thought, you know, strong mixed reactions. I thought, wonderful, we must get it together with our gay brothers. In the same hand, you know, I was going, you know, I thought, I went and asked a doctor about, you know, whether I should be just sticking to beer, which I drank from bottles, or could you get it from a glass if they didn't wash it well enough? Could you get it from the air? I think it did not take me too long to realize that I was being silly, and obviously it's not going around in the lesbian community, but I think it's quite a horrible thing still, even though I don't have selfish concern anymore.
This is like, it could be blown up so much in the straight press to be, oh, here go these homosexuals again. And there are a lot of gay men, I think, who at first felt that it was some divine retribution from God or something, that, yes, we have been doing all these things we don't really want to talk about right now, but and so this is what we've gotten.
Long before AIDS, I used to talk with my gay male friends about the whole issue of promiscuity, and I've always was very fascinated by this whole sexual underside of life. I used to hear stories of them going to truck stops in Michigan and having sex with truck drivers and backroom sex and things, and I was just fascinated because it was such a foreign thing to me, and it was so far from, to me it was like the opposite of what sex was, or what sexuality and sensuousness was. So I think I was fascinated at the same time that I was repelled. I wouldn't say that the AIDS scare had too much effect on my changing my thinking about it either way.
It personally rather offends me when you suggest to gay men that it's probably a safer thing to do to think about having a monogamous lifestyle, to find one nice boy and settle down with him. I think the reaction of a lot of gay men is basically as though somebody has, stuck a finger in their mouths. They, and what they're gagging and vomiting over essentially is the lesbian lifestyle, the lifestyle that most gay women have.
Some lesbians have a tendency to be a little self-righteous. It's like, we're monogamous and we just are so nurturing and loving that you guys have to be this way too. And I've even heard some friends of mine say about AIDS that they're tired of hearing men talk about themselves as victims, and they are, you know, they're active agents in this whole thing, and they should own up to some kind of responsibility for it in that way.
Well, I think they're active agents if you're going to just call, you know, being deliberately blind about, you know, not even wanting to hear about promiscuity, which I think a lot of men, you know, they don't want to hear about it. You know, it's not that they want to find out about it and then make the decision, well, you know, maybe this is harmful to my health, I'm going to do it anyway because of such and such. You know, they don't want to hear. We certainly have a lot to learn from gay men. I don't think we have any right to be self-righteous. I don't think that lighting a candle, you know, and putting on a Chris Williamson record and playing Kissy Face is the ideal, you know, sexual, you know, thing to aim for.
I think that peer pressure is the only thing that's going to stop the epidemic. It's going to get people to start talking about it and say if somebody has a deadly disease, then they should definitely, you know, you should definitely tell other people. I think I'm impressed with some of the work that some of the gay men's groups are doing. For example, the Nuns of Perpetual Indulgence in San Francisco have this wonderful little pamphlet that talks about ways to have safe, you know, the kinds of procedures for sex and promiscuity and things like that. And I think that kind of work within the gay men's community is really, it's very good to see. And I think that they've learned a lot from the women's health care movement in terms of that self-education, because they certainly must know by now that the AMA is not going to help. I mean, it's the gay male community that's going to do it.
I think it's unfortunate that so many gay men who lead their life this way have to really decide if they think it is a symptom, or not a symptom, but a cause. Should they cut back going to the back rooms or the number of partners they have? But I think to make any moral judgment about it is not right.
I think at this point, because of the health problem, gay men and women should be talking together. I think gay men have a lot to learn from lesbians about our particular, you know, about the nurturing kind of relationship, about one-on-one relationships, about basic monogamy. But I really would not try and say that that's the most ideal thing, you know, if all things were perfect and there wasn't health considerations. I think that lesbians also have a lot to learn about gay men. I would be dishonest if I didn't say that I didn't have some feelings of envy for the gay male lifestyle. You know, I look at it and think sometimes, well, if it wasn't for, you know, health problems, boy, if I could just switch places, you know, and be in a gay man's brain for, you know, 24 hours and go to the tubs and see what that was really like, boy, that would be really interesting. You know, because I just can't imagine what it would be like, and sometimes it just seems like it would be just enormous, sublime fun. You know, it just seems like it would be wonderful, but fun, basically, I think is all it is. And when you talk about pitting fun against losing your life, I think there isn't much of a choice.
The issue of promiscuity is a really hot issue surrounding the question of AIDS right now. There's been an ongoing and often heated debate about the relationship of sexually transmitted diseases and promiscuity and the gay male lifestyle in the 70s and 80s. And we've decided to invite two people who for the past year and a half have been debating this with their friends and writing about it in the gay press, and have them air their views in Point Counterpoint. Charles Jurist is a writer for the New York Native, and this issue is so heated that we had to flip a coin, and he'll be going first. And Michael Callen is one of the founders of Gay Men with AIDS. First, Charles Jurist will have his say, and then I'll introduce Michael Callen, who will do a counterpoint to his discussion.
The AIDS epidemic stirs up many emotions, including, unfortunately, guilt and self-hatred, feelings many gay men have never conquered. We really need to beware of these old enemies when deciding how healthy men should deal with the possibility of getting the disease. There is a consensus among gay physicians. Most healthy men I know are acting on it, as am I. Those with ongoing sexual relationships are being more strictly monogamous. Those who are single have cut out anonymous sex and are more careful about the men they have sex with when they date. But they do continue to date, in many cases precisely because they're looking for permanent monogamous relationships. We also hear some more hysterical voices. They come from a tiny group of men, some of whom have AIDS. AIDS patients I know from my work with the gay men's health crisis don't agree with them. They say the only responsible alternative to monogamy is virtual celibacy. We who don't have lovers are told that we have to give up sex because of a new brand of ethics invented by this self-appointed group. Who are these men? I don't think their names are important, but their histories are. For example, one is a former hustler, an S&M hustler who provided pain for a price. This man probably had more sexual contacts in 1 year than I did in 10. He's not someone who's going to lay down the ethical agenda for my future. This same man once told me I'm a fool for continuing to have sex with men I date. Then he lit a cigarette. According to the American Cancer Society, 80,000 men died in 1982 from diseases caused by cigarette smoking. That means roughly 88,000 gay men died in 1 year. Contrast that to the entire AIDS caseload, which amounts to about 1,000. Yet the man who wants to impose celibacy on me smokes. Interesting. I'm a gay man. It took me years to bring myself to say that openly and with pride. Certainly my sexuality is only a part of my gayness, but it is the central part. If I can't join another man's body to mine, then how am I gay? Liking Bette Midler isn't enough. Make no mistake, I know about this disease and I know it may strike me tomorrow. I'm scared. The crucial question is, how will I let my fear affect me? I know what I won't do. I won't give up the physical expression of intimacy. And in my sexual encounters, we won't start out with a health quiz, nor will we limit our lovemaking to certain acts. I refuse to treat my partner as a sick person or to present myself as one. That's the trip that Socarides and Bryant and Falwell have tried to lay on us. I'm not going to lay it on myself. To act otherwise, to give up sexual communication out of the fear of physical illness and death, is really to embrace another kind of death. The death of wholeness, the death of the spirit, in fact, the death of the self.
Next, our guest, Michael Callen, who is one of the founders of a group called Gay Men with AIDS, will reply to this point of view.
I am a 27-year-old gay man with AIDS, and I have been asked to talk about the volatile issue of promiscuity. Promiscuity is a vague word which means different things to different people. But until we develop a better vocabulary, promiscuity remains the best word we have to describe the historically unique phenomenon of large numbers of urban gay men who have large numbers of different sexual partners in such commercialized settings as bathhouses, back rooms, bookstores, balconies, meat racks, and tea rooms. The debate about the role of promiscuity in defining urban gay maleness has been changed utterly and forever, because now gay men are dying, gay men like you and me. To those who understand the reality of AIDS, to those who wake up every morning and examine their bodies for KS lesions, to those who have seen friends and lovers and former tricks waste away like victims of Auschwitz, disfigured by disease, urban gay male promiscuity as we know it today has no defense. The political issues raised by promiscuity are important, but what civil rights do dead men have? In New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles in 1983, walking into the baths and back rooms with the delusion that you can check your responsibility at the door with your clothes is an act of personal and cultural suicide. Either you do not love life or you do not know death. What is over isn't sex, just sex without responsibility. The Stonewall generation, which has permitted sex to become just one more consumer commodity, which has allowed sex and affection to become so separated, and which has become numb to disease, must now begin to formulate a long overdue sexual ethic. The formulation of this ethic will require a change radical in its simplicity. We will have to talk to each other, yes, even before sex, and maybe even after. And we will have to learn how to listen to each other. We need to have forums on creative and medically safe ways to have sex. Lovers, condoms, jerk-off clubs, and closed circles of fuck buddies are just a few of the alternatives some gay men are exploring. these men are rediscovering how nice it is not to worry about disease or death during or after sex. Ending this health emergency begins with each one of us taking responsibility for his own health, and by so doing, ensuring the health of his partners. As long as we continue to selfishly ask, is that man a health risk to me, without first asking, am I a health risk to him, we will never be free from the tyranny of AIDS. Our challenge is to figure out how to have gay, life-affirming sex, satisfy our emotional needs, and stay alive. Hard questions for hard times, but whatever happened to our great gay imagination?
One of the things that's become clear to us is that gay men, especially in large cities where there are large gay male populations, are going to have to start talking to each other a hell of a lot more than they have been about the issues of sex and promiscuity, and eventually their responsibility to each other as men. Also, I'd like to tell you tonight that AIDS attacks your immune system. It does not attack your sense of humor. One of the things we've been bombarded with over the years is right-wingers telling us that we're the cause of everything from flash floods in Montana to earthquakes in California. We'd like to take you to a little laboratory on Christopher Street where a doctor will treat you to a crackpot theory of our own.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nedrick Polyp. I'd like to speak to you this evening about one of the greatest dangers threatening American life today, quiche. Now, 3 years ago, when our crack team of concerned chefs and scientists began to investigate quiche, we knew we were onto something, but not of this magnitude. Consider the evidence. The total North American consumption of quiche for the years 1979 to 1982 parallels the increasing number of homosexual American males for the same period. At a time when quiche became as popular and accessible as Big Macs, America's gay community soared. Well, it didn't take our team of experts long to interpret these findings. The evidence is conclusive. Quiche causes homosexuality. Moreover, it is but one symptom of an even greater homosexual threat to the American lifestyle, sudden brunch syndrome. Now, for months, our experts have tested and retested late into the night to verify our findings. Our greatest breakthrough came with a recent experiment. The subjects were two heterosexual white mice. Mouse A was fed an exclusive diet of meat and potatoes, while Mouse B was given daily servings of quiche au fromage. The results were significant. As you can see, Mouse A remained virtually the same. He continued to belch and demand reruns of the Super Bowl. However, Mouse B, the changes are alarming. Decorator furnishings, a Gloria Gaynor on the stereo, but perhaps most damningly of all, constant requests for Bette Midler videos. Overwhelming proof such as this has convinced us at the gastronomical and behavioral research labs that America must re-educate her taste buds to avoid the spread of this deviance. We have a long way to go in understanding this mysterious ailment, but that is something you can do. If you eat quiche, stop. If you have friends or loved ones who eat quiche, warn them of the risks. We want to wipe out quiche in your lifetime. Thank you.
As you can well imagine, finding out that you have AIDS is a frightening experience. Panic, helplessness, despair are all common and understandable reactions. The Gay Men's Health Crisis was formed to help people deal with having AIDS. We have with us here tonight the coordinator for crisis intervention at the Gay Men's Health Crisis, Diego Lopez. And next to him, we have a man who was diagnosed as having AIDS in April of 1982. His name is Bill Burke. Bill's condition is now called improving. Bill, what does it mean for an AIDS patient to be improving?
Well, for me, when I was first diagnosed, I had had fevers of about 99, 101 for over a year. I had swollen lymph glands, which is called lymphadenopathy. They seem to be flattening out. My temperature has stabilized. I now have a normal temperature. I was extremely fatigued. Today I have more energy. My platelet count and my white count, which were both low, have come up into a normal range, as has my T-cell ratio.
Okay, what was the first thing that indicated to you that what you had might be AIDS and not swollen glands or the mumps or something?
To tell you the truth, in the beginning I was just beginning to hear about AIDS, and I went to a forum that the Gay Men's Health Crisis gave, their first forum. And it was at that time that I realized something was wrong and I should go to a doctor.
Are you satisfied with the way doctors have handled you or other gay men that you know, or the epidemic as a whole?
Not entirely. I mean, I know for me, it was handled sometimes very insensitively. I was told in the beginning, when one of them suspected that I did have Kaposi's, that he wouldn't look me in the eye. He just put his head down and told me to just live your life as you had been going. And that terrified me. I was terrified at that point, but it turned out that I wasn't. And that seems to have been the case with me and a number of other patients that I've talked to.
How did the Gay Men's Health Crisis then intervene or help you out at this point?
At this point, I really wasn't aware what the Gay Men's Health Crisis offered. I had a wonderful support network of my own that I was able to avail myself of.
What was that?
Alcoholics Anonymous, to be perfectly honest. And,
sorry.
It's all right.
Open mouth, insert foot. Go ahead.
At that time, and it was during the next forum that I went to that they held at Julia Richmond School that I saw the panic and the hysteria on other men's faces. And I identified with that, and in some way I wanted to reach out and help. And then at that time I got involved with the Gay Men's Health Crisis.
Were you counseled when you went there?
I went right into orientation to become a counselor myself.
Okay. I'd like to now talk to Diego. What exactly does the Gay Men's Health Crisis do?
Well, basically we're a clearinghouse for the patient calls that we get. For example, every patient comes through me. I, in turn, will assess their needs on the phone as quickly and as rapidly and as thoroughly as possible. Sometimes that's not possible if the patient's very sick. If somebody's calling from the hospital and they really are truly sick, you just want to get where they are and let them know somebody is coming. And from that point on, I go to one of my team leaders. We've gotten so much larger than we originally started. We started out with 15 men, and we thought we could just handle all the work. Instead, we've got now 5 teams, and they're on the average of 15 persons in each team.
How does a team work?
Well, a team basically is trained on a weekend around the issues of crisis, what a crisis is, does a crisis exist, you know, that kind of situation, and they're given information on how to handle different kinds of situations with patients and their families and lovers and care partners. And then by the end of the weekend, they are ready, they are assigned patients, and they go and they reach out to these patients.
What's a crisis?
A crisis is basically where stress has overwhelmed a patient and or their support systems, where the support systems have completely broken down. And since a lot of times we don't know whether a crisis situation really exists, in many cases it doesn't. In some cases, it's basically someone calling, wanting to talk to someone, needing a listening ear. You know? And once we establish if a crisis exists or not, then the next thing we have to find out is at what point are we entering the process? Why is this person calling us now? If they were diagnosed a year ago, why now? Did they get PCP again? Did they get KS? Did their lover come down with AIDS? Okay, and that's happening. And also one of the incredible things that's happening now is I've had this week women calling me that their spouses, their husbands have AIDS. And
these are heterosexual
couples. Okay, and that's happening. I'm getting bisexual persons calling now. And dealing with their families, and especially for the bisexuals and for the gay men that are calling, for a lot of them, it's forcing them out of the closet. So that really adds to the stress and the overwhelmingness that they experience and the isolation. And you said it, the panic that sets in.
The salient problems that come with having AIDS, you mentioned some of them, being forced out of the closet, but I was wondering if there were those problems that are different from having another serious illness.
Yes.
I experienced it as that, and I think a lot of our counselors do. I think Bill has, and I think a lot of people have. Basically, you know, a crisis has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. All right, when you and most the point of a crisis team is to have people available almost immediately to go out there and get involved in a situation and try to lend your own strengths to that system, to that particular patient or their whole system, to the family, to the spouses, like we're doing now with some of these heterosexual women. Their husbands aren't seeing us, but the women are, and their families. And we have to be able to assess what it is that we can do. And with this particular disease, you get to helping them by lending them your ego strengths, and at some point when they begin to function, and the point is to get them self-directed and clear, and hopefully into a group, into a support area, they're hit wham. Before they're resolved, the resolution doesn't really occur. What occurs is another hazardous event, which is basically another opportunistic disease like pneumocystis pneumonia or Kaposi sarcoma or another opportunistic infection, so that you don't end, and they're right back at the beginning again.
Yeah. So that of course makes it much worse, and they're back in crisis.
Exactly.
Can I ask you, we just heard a debate about promiscuity. Do you discuss issues of sex and promiscuity? Maybe I'd like to hear from Bill as both a counselor and an AIDS patient. Do you discuss this with people who call up? Is it an issue?
All the time. It's one of the major issues, and a lot of people are very conflicted about it. And there's an ongoing discussion. Different doctors have different opinions, and there's no one opinion that anybody wants to listen to. And some people will hear what they want to hear. Right. If they want to continue to be promiscuous, they will continue to be promiscuous. And it comes down to a matter of personal choice. You know, whether you want to make the effort to get better. And I know for me, and I know for a lot of other people, that it really takes aggressive caretaking to get better.
What are some of the things that you've done on the category of aggressive caretaking to get better since you're improving?
I've learned to listen to my body more, listen to when I'm hungry. Really, for me and for a lot of other patients that I've talked to, that our eating patterns were not the best. Another one is not taking care of our body as far as rest goes. I was always pushing myself. I would never, I would be tired and yet continue going. Today, I sleep when I'm tired, and I know that's what other people are doing too, and sometimes you can't do anything more than that.
When I first heard about AIDS, I was convinced that it was lack of sleep, and since I never sleep with my 45 jobs, I was convinced that I was going to be the next AIDS patient, because clearly it was merely lack of sleep. Has having AIDS affected your sex life and your relations to other people, like friends, family?
I think it's affected every area of my life. It has certainly affected my sex life in terms of the way I conduct it, which is completely different. I had initiated a change in my life when I got sober, and continued that. And I think this was just you know, my recovery from both my alcoholism and drug addiction, and my recovery from AIDS, as I see it. I am recovering, I'm in the process of recovering, has all contributed to my sense of rediscovering myself and my priorities and what is important in my life, and finding who I am underneath all that, just to stop running.
As Charles Jurist said, does this making a new set of priorities rule out sex, or?
It certainly changes it. For some people it has. For me it hasn't. For me it just means a lot more discretion and discrimination in terms of who my partners are, and getting to know who I'm with, rather than just going to bed. Yeah.
Okay. There's a question I'd like to jump to now for both of you. How do you feel about the response of the gay male community to AIDS? And there's a part two to that question, which is, how do you feel about the straight media's handling of AIDS? And I'd sort of like to hear from both of you on that. Diego? John?
Well, I think this is my first experience of men in the gay community outside of a disco or sexual context. Okay, I think it's incredible the amount of people that have come forth to the gay men's health crisis to do this work.
Okay, it's really getting together and talking to each other and exploring other options and what it is that we have to do, because we have to be somewhat creative to be able to offer some options to the patients and to their families and their significant others, to all the people that are calling us. So I really feel like in many ways it's an incredible experience for me personally, and I think for a lot of the counselors, you know.
How do you feel about that? Do you think
well, it's been a wonderful experience for me dealing with other people, but you know, the community at large, I mean, I'm dealing with a lot of compassionate individuals right now.
At the health crisis?
At the health crisis and with patients. However, there are segments of the community that still have their head in the sand about it, and those I can't speak for. I can only speak for myself. And I'm one person trying to do something to help, both for me and for other people.
Yeah. Well, maybe this show will get some of those heads out of the sand. But and I do want to get back to part 2 of that question, which is the straight media.
Well, the media always upsets me because they use statistics. And statistics I don't like, because basically if you listen to statistics, everybody is dying. I mean, Billy doesn't look like he's dying. You know, I mean, he has AIDS, but I think we have to also address the medical area too, because there are different facets of what AIDS actually is, and there are different diagnoses for AIDS. So with the media, I can't really get heavy with the media without getting heavy with the medical community also.
Yeah, get heavy with the medical community for a minute.
I think that really, number one, we need doctors that are willing to see patients who can't pay.
Who cannot pay.
Cannot pay. We have patients who are in a hospital, city hospitals, not being treated properly, whose doctors change every month, and it's extremely frustrating for us to work with them and for them to get clear answers. They don't have one particular doctor. I haven't had a doctor call me yet and say, I'll see someone, it's okay if he doesn't have the money. All right? That's our community, our medical community I'm
talking
about.
Gay doctors you're talking about. What kind of outreach has been done to possibly contact gay doctors and have them kind of organize into a group offering their services?
Well, they offer their services in training. You know, in the training, they do. You know, I have to be fair that they do come to our training weekends and they offer their services, and they offer their services in writing and to the media, and I still think it's not enough.
So there is no organization at this point of gay doctors who will see non-paying AIDS patients?
Not that I know of. There may be. I don't know about it yet.
Yeah. Do you feel, Bill, that the straight media is blaming gays? Blaming the victim, as Ginny Apuzzo said?
It seems to me that they are, but they're no more responsible for AIDS as heterosexuals are for herpes. You know, we didn't cause it, you know, per se. We were victims, and unfortunately.
Oh, I agree with you. What I'm wondering is, I don't think.
You're talking about in terms of the way the media is.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they. Yeah.
I've had a lot of trouble with the media, and like Diego, I've had a lot of trouble with the medical community myself, and my own experience with it.
Do you feel that unlike straight people and herpes, that the straight media is blaming the gay community?
People don't die from herpes, and I don't know. It's they can't. There's no blame to be made.
I think they do.
You think they do blame us?
Yeah, and it's not that subtle. I think you could see it on the coverages, you know, in the newspapers.
Okay, I'd like to thank you both for being with us and talking about this emotional issue. I think you've been great, and especially Bill to come and sort of bare his soul in front of all these people. And I hope that the effect is that those people who aren't already organized around the issue do get organized around the issue. Maybe the most important thing to remember is the need to gather together, to talk, to be clear, to share information, and to help each other, which has been said before on the show, and as Diego said now, it seems to be that question of a support group is a turning point, or a very important question dealing with AIDS. I'd like to just tell you what's going to be on our show for next week. It's quite different from this week. We're going to be talking to Amy Ashworth, one of the directors of the New York Parents of Gays, and a young man, Jay Blotcher, who came out to his mother 2 years ago and hasn't regretted it since. Tom Steele will perform a satire of Parents of Gays to lighten up that issue a little bit. Also, 2 black lesbians will be with us. 80-year-old Mabel Hampton will talk about being a lesbian in Harlem in the 1930s, and Jewel Gomez will come and read a lesbian vampire story. Before I say goodnight, I'd like to thank our mad scientist, Frank Richards, who performed the role of Dr. Nedrick Polyp. Without even a credit on our show, we wouldn't want the AMA to get on his tail. Good evening. I'm Marcia Pally. Good night.
This week's edition of Our Time has been devoted to AIDS, a major health crisis in the gay community. We'll be updating a lot of the information that you've heard tonight in weeks to come on this series, And tonight we're going to be closing with a public service announcement from one of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence from San Francisco, Sister Missionary Position, who will tell you about a VD pamphlet that you can send for, and you'll hear a last answer to one of our questions on the street. Please remember that there is one thing you can do immediately, and that's that you can buy a ticket to the circus on April 30th at Madison Square Garden, when every seat will be filled by a gay man. 18,000 gay men at Madison Square Garden for the circus, raising $150,000 for research on AIDS. Also, please remember that it's up to you to help to stop this epidemic. This disease has killed more people than toxic shock syndrome, Legionnaire's disease, swine flu epidemic, and the Tylenol murders all put together. And those were on the front pages of every newspaper in the country for weeks. You don't hear a thing about this, and when you do, it's homophobia and hatred from the New York Times and from the straight press. Remember that this disease is not caused by gays. It's not caused by being gay. There's no such thing as gay cancer. There's no such thing as a gay disease. This disease is attacking gays, and only gay people are going to stop it. This is your community, and your community needs you now. If you want to write to us for any of the addresses on our screen that you may have missed tonight, or write us a letter about the show or anything else that's on your mind, please write to Our Time Television, WNYC TV, number 1 Center Street, New York, 1007. Good night and thank you.
We want you to come. We want you to come often, but most of all, the sisters want you to come clean. I'm Sister Missionary Position with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And with our little VD pamphlet, Play Fair, you can learn how to come clean and often with your brothers and sisters.
With all this talk about immunodeficiency diseases that gay men are getting, there's a lot of publicity in the newspapers. Are you aware that any gay men, friends of yours, or people you know have changed their attitudes about promiscuity as a result of being scared about this?
Well, everybody I know is scared shitless.